Imagine, dear viewer, the playset you loved as a kid. Remember the countless hours you spent swinging from rung to rung, daydreaming of all the bad guys you fight, holding tea parties under the slides with your friends, both stuffed and imaginary, seeing just how high you could go on the swings. We all know this playset. As we grew older, we'd leave it behind, but we always cherish it in our memories. Maybe even sometimes we'd walk, then later drive past it just to smile once again for nostalgia's sake. Now imagine trying to go to play on it all these years later. It's still the same playset, but now it's changed. The slide is shorter than you remember, the swing's not as exhilarating, and you don't even have to leave the ground to use the monkey bars. While the playset hasn't changed, your perception of it has. This brings me neatly to the game in question, Twilight Princess. Launched in 2006, I first played it 7 years ago. I fondly remember exploring everywhere in Hyrule, gasping in amazement over the twists and turns in the story, feeling shocked seeing Link transform for the first time, and the rush of exhilaration after beating Ganon. But, coming back to it now, I begin to realize that perhaps the game isn't as fun as I remember it to be. In order to explain, let's do a quick summary of the story. The game starts off with Link living in Ordon Village. Not much happens here, both in the village and in the intro, until some goblins barge in out of nowhere, capture the kids, open a hole to the Matrix, and summon some black creatures into the pond. After fighting them off, Link chases down the goblins, encounters a black gate, and is sucked through. Once inside, he becomes Doggo and is dragged away. We wake up inside a dungeon, befriend Midna, climb to the peak, meet Zelda, who has a lengthy conversation with Midna, then head back to Ordon Village. After collecting a sword and shield, we head back to the pond and meet Pharaon, the light spirit. After some more dialogue, we go to hunt down the light insects. So we kill them, collect the light tears, return the vessel to the light, and the twilight is banished and we are human again. The light spirit tells us that there is an evil power we must collect that will help us save the world. The power was sealed away by the goddess, but now that we're in dire straits, the time has come to use it. The Pharaon spirit tells us that the fused shadow is the only thing capable of defeating Zant. So we head into the forest temple, douse a plant in Roundup, and get the first piece of fused shadow. After collecting that first piece, we are warped back to the Light Spirit. We then learn from the Light Spirit that Hyrule isn't safe and we should go east to Eldin. So we head to the Eldin region, find the land covered in twilight, once again become Doggo, once again head to the Light Spirit, once again get the Light Vessel, once again track down the bugs, kill them, fill the vessel, and return the tears to the Light Spirit. Once again we restore light to the land. With light restored, the Light Spirit of Eldin tells us that the shadow power rests in the sacred grounds of the Gorons. So after some faffing about and seeing the mayor of Ordon Village in way too little clothing, we head into the Fire Temple, help return a Goron his sanity, get another piece of the fused shadow, then get told that more of Hyrule is covered in twilight. So we move on. We meet the Lanayru Light Spirit, get the Light Vessel, kill the Light Bugs, once again hear that the fused shadow is the only thing capable of beating Zant, then head into the Water Temple. After spending way too long being lost in a water temple once again, we fight a tentacle fish, get the third fused shadow, and can now beat Zant. Except Lamau, Zant effortlessly removes the fused shadow, curses Midna, and turns Link into permanent Doggo. So we run to Zelda, she heals Midna, then says screw this, I'm out of here, and we run off into the Pharaon Woods and grab the Master Sword, where we also learn that the Master Sword is the sword that evil cannot touch. Tears of the Kingdom. Which transforms us back into a human. But now we have a problem. Our only method of defeating Zant, the fused shadow, the one thing we've been told is actually capable of saving the day, is now worthless. And now there isn't a way to defeat Zant. He takes over all of Hyrule and casts everything into eternal twilight. Nah, just kidding. Turns out there's an entirely different way to beat Zant, one that wasn't mentioned before because reasons. So we head to the Arbiter's grounds, but oh no, the Twilight Mirror is shattered. And now there isn't any way to defeat Zant. He takes over all of Hyrule and casts everything into eternal twilight. Nah, just kidding. So it turns out the Twilight Mirror can be broken, but not destroyed, as only the true ruler of the Twilight can utterly destroy the mirror. So off we go to find 3 more mirror shards. Let's just pause here for a moment to appreciate that all we have successfully done is replace one fetch quest with another. So we head into the mountains, wander around a rundown mansion, fight a she-yeti, and acquire a mirror shard. Next, we have to chase down a mirror shard in the past. So we head back to the Sacred Grove, return the sword to the pedestal, walk through a doorway of time, and make it to the Temple of Time. We squish some spiders, move a robot, squish the spider mom, then get another mirror shard. We take the rod of robot manipulation back to the present, but now it's dead because gameplay. So now we have to save an old woman from some goblins, turn on the rod, run around the entire map, moving statues, finally finishing a spell that removes a plug from another statue that we can move that unlocks a cannon that we can take to fire who fixes it that we can launch ourselves to the dungeon of the sky to get the final shard. So we head up into the sky, spend way too long hanging from flying plants, kill a dragon, and get the final shard. So we warp over to the Arbiter's grounds, reassemble the mirror, and enter the Twilight. After rescuing some glowing balls from some giant hands, we climb the tower and face off against the final boss, the one who has put Hyrule in such dire straits, who defeated Zelda herself. He takes us through all the previous boss fights, but we keep beating him down. Finally, we defeat him. Wounded, he laughs at us because we can't defeat him while his master, Ganondorf, keeps him alive. Midna, though, gets tired of his crap and kills him, so we head off to fight Ganondorf. So we head back to the castle. Midna equips all the Fused Shadow and turns into Super Midna and uses all of her power to poke a hole in the shield around Hyrule Castle. We fight our way to the top and come face to face with Ganondorf. He possesses Zelda, we fight her for a bit, Midna banishes Ganondorf from her, then fight a pig, then Midna sacrifices herself to fight him. But it's okay because she doesn't die. We then fight him on horseback, we then fight him as swordsman versus swordsman. We beat him, skewer him, Midna returns and shatters the Mirror of Twilight and leaves Hyrule for good. With the summary out of the way, I think this game fails in 3 key areas. These being the plot, the dungeons, and the atmosphere. Let's start with the plot. This isn't a follow along and figure things out type plot. This is the Kingdom Hearts turn your brain off and enjoy the spectacle type plot. Plot points are contrived randomly and are resolved just as quickly. Like the Twilight Mirror Fused Shadow. At the beginning of the game, we're told very clearly that only the Fused Shadow is strong enough to defeat Zant and nothing else. Then we collect the Fused Shadow, only to realize that the Fused Shadow is not only not enough to defeat Zant, it's also not the only way to defeat Zant. So glad we spent 3 dungeons to collect this Fused Shadow only to be laughed at by the game for being so stupid. And like, after hearing that the Fused Shadow was useless and the mirror is the only thing that can beat Zant, we as the player lose all connection to the story because we're half expecting the game to pull another Uno reverse just to tell us we need to collect something else. And yes, I get the parallel with Ocarina of Time with the first 3 dungeons collecting the stone to get the Master Sword, only to get sucked into the future and plans to change. But I've already given my thoughts on that here. For another example of this being a turn your brain off plot, Zelda herself. She is shown as the ruler of Hyrule, who is defeated by Zant. This is an interesting take on the Princess Zelda trope, but it's immediately ruined by Zant locking her in her room and leaving her alive? Like, this only makes sense if Zant were calling the shots here. He doesn't know Zelda's history, so it would make sense to keep her alive, to gloat over her because he wouldn't realize how dangerous she is. But the problem is, it's not Zant calling the shots, it's Ganondorf. He knows how dangerous it is to leave Zelda alive. He now has her captured and under his complete power, and the worst punishment he can think of is house arrest. Like, the only reason she's kept alive is because the plot needs her alive later to help the heroes out. And actually scratch that about Zant. He says he curses the royal family of Hyrule for cursing him to be in the Twilight. So he also doesn't like the royal family. And the best punishment he can come up with is stay in your room? Like, really? As well, unpopular opinion, but the kid should have been cut from the story. At the beginning of the game, they get captured, leading us to chase after them, which leads us to the Twilight. Then after we beat the Forest Temple, we head into Kakariko, only to find them with the village elders safe and secure. Well, I mean, as safe as you can be in the Twilight. Like, thanks for making me feel all worried about them, game, if you're just gonna rescue them off camera without my input. The only times they show up later is when Colin acts brave and gets captured, who we rescue in 10 seconds. Then later we learn that Ilya was captured, so it becomes a subplot point to rescue her. Except we later learn that she escaped on her own and rescued a Zora kid. So again, it's tell don't show with the kids, as their adventures all happen off screen. And even what parts of the plot are somewhat good, they're so slow and or repetitive that it strips any enjoyment from them. For instance, my favorite dungeon in this game is Snow Peak Ruins. The dungeon itself is fun, and playing around in the ruins of a grand house inexplicably in the mountains is quite enjoyable. However, to get there, you must start down the trail for the dungeon, meet a woman dressed as a Yeti named Ashi, who then mentions she has seen the Yeti coming down into the Zora domain to take red fish. She gives you a drawing of said fish, which you take to Prince Rallis after completing his monotonous storyline, who tells you it's a reek fish and where to find it. He gives you a hook that can catch said reek fish, so you head back to Zora's domain, catch the fish, learn its scent, track it through the snow, meet the Yeti, then snowboard to the house. While the dungeon itself is fun, why on earth does it take 3 hours to get to it? For another example of slow gameplay, take the entire intro segment. During the beginning of the game, Link and co are faffing about in Ordon Village. This is fine, except it takes 2 hours and nothing happens. Then, when something finally does happen and you get taken into the Twilight, you're then treated to another hour-long tutorial on how to be a dog. Like, I know it's been a joke about this game having a long intro, but seriously, a casual playthrough of this game doesn't actually begin until the 3 to 4 hour mark. And don't even get me started on repetitive gameplay. The first 3 dungeons consist broadly of find the light spirit, acquire light vessel, track down light bugs, kill light bugs, fill up light vessel, return vessel to light spirit, return light to land, complete side quests for the locals, enter dungeon, collect view shadow. With very little variation, that's roughly the first 30% of the entire game. Then there's the statue moving section to find the sky letters, chasing the skull kid in the woods not once, but twice, and other sections that make this game an absolute drag to get through. And yes, I know a lot of this game's plot points and themes tie back to Ocarina of Time for the lore, but I am judging this game solely on its own merits. If you make a game or any bit of media that needs other media to make sense or seem enjoyable, then you haven't made a fun bit of media. You've made an extended advertisement for the other stuff. Another issue with the plot is that it kind of falls apart if you question it at all. Like, the light spirits. We've been told many times through the game that these light spirits have been gravely wounded by the shadow monsters taking their tears of light. We help return the light to the land and restore everything to normal. Except my question is, why can't Zant steal the light again? Like, there's no safeguards to stop the monsters from coming back, and if they did it once, and they fought the light spirit in the light on its home turf, why can't they do it again? My last issue with the plot is Ganondorf. I wish he were cut from the game. At the beginning of the game, Zant is built up as this mysterious and powerful being. He storms Hyrule Castle, takes out the light spirits, and almost sets himself up as king of the world. For the first 90% of the game, you're working on beating Zant. Everything is leading up to your confrontation with him. He's the one who took over the Twilight Realm. He's the one who took over Hyrule. He's the one, except Lamau, he's just a goofy guy and a puppet of Ganondorf's. I get why they did this, it's cause they wanted Ganondorf to be the big bad behind their Zelda game. But he's not built up at all. He's not mentioned for the first 75% of the game, and even when he is mentioned, he's defeated and sent to the Shadow Realm. So he's already been dealt with. Then you face Zant, and all Zant's agency has been stripped in favor of building up Ganondorf, who is in the game for less than the 3 kids are in the start. Next, the dungeons. In Ocarina of Time, the dungeons were unique each. Yes, the textures are pretty dated by today's standard, but people still fondly remember the Deku Tree, the Forest Temple, the bottom of the well, etc. How many of those same people would remember the Goron Mines, or the Lakebed Temple? The only memorable dungeons from this game really are the Arbiter's Grounds, Snow Peak Ruins, City in the Sky, and maybe Temple of Time. But even then, how many people actually remember their way around said dungeon? Not only that, but the dungeon pacing is terrible. In Ocarina of Time, the dungeons were exquisitely done. First, you had the Deku Tree, a small, very linear dungeon with no mini-boss and no small keys. Then Dodongo's Cavern, which was slightly bigger, but still no mini-boss and no small keys. Then Jabu Jabu's Belly, which again was slightly bigger. This time, however, it featured a mini-boss, but again, no small keys. Then the Forest Temple, which finally introduced small keys. The developers wanted to progressively build up the player to these harder and harder puzzles. In this game, the first temple, the Forest Temple, is freaking massive with tons of small keys and a mini-boss. In fact, I'd argue that both the Temple of Time and Palace of Twilight are both smaller dungeons than the Forest Temple. And don't even get me started on the Lakebed Temple. That dungeon I will gladly never play again. It's like the devs listened to all the criticisms of the Water Temple from Ocarina of Time and resolutely ignored all of it. And worst of all, you can't roll up the stairs in the central room. And late game dungeons just get severely bloated. Like the Temple in the Sky, for a casual playthrough, expect to spend at least 2 hours in the dungeon alone. There's so much backtracking, wandering around looking for where to go, trying to figure out puzzles, then backtracking with the dungeon item, that you really should just have a walkthrough open, just to have somewhat of an enjoyable experience. Couple that with a ridiculous late game bloat where the process to get to the dungeons gets immeasurably long, and you have a miserable experience all around. Not only are the dungeons long and winding, but the music is awful. People fondly remember Ocarina of Time's Gerudo Valley theme, the Forest Temple theme, and most people could even recall the Spirit Temple theme after a couple notes. But without looking it up, can you even recall how the Lakebed Temple theme sounds? And who has the Temple of Time dungeon song in their Spotify playlist? Or to belabor the point even more, does anyone even remember the Overworld or Twilight Battle theme songs? To drive this point even further home, let's compare the Twilight Princess Twilight battle music with the Wind Waker battle music. First, Wind Waker. Notice the complexity of the music, how the different instruments move about in pitch, how different parts move independently of each other. Notice the feeling of urgency in the clearly defined melody. Now, let's compare that to the Twilight Princess Twilight Battle theme. Notice how this one sounds like someone having a seizure while playing the synthesizer. It suffers from being too complex and too simple at the same time. There's too many moving parts, too many simultaneous solos, no grounding bass line, it's just hot garbage. This isn't to say that all the game's music sucks. There are some good tracks. In fact, I still really like Kakariko Is Saved. But from the most part, the songs range from not memorable at all to this is hot garbage, please turn it off. Finally, the atmosphere. This game tried something new with the feel of the game, as they went for a much darker feeling, which I like. I just wish they stuck with it. This game deals in the darker side of Hyrule, how criminals were dealt with, and the horrors of the Hylian prisons. This, I think, works phenomenally. But then there's clowns, the bug lady, and the postman. Like, they try to combine the hangman's noose with the carnival, and it just doesn't mesh well. For another example, let's look at the section of gameplay from when you first enter the Twilight to the mini-boss of the Forest Temple. As you're heading through the castle underground, you come across soldiers who are terrified. They don't know what's going on, they can't see anything, but they do see their friends getting attacked and slaughtered by shadow monsters. They're getting picked off one by one, and there's nothing any of them can do about it. This, then, after a time, leads to the Forest Temple. Everything so far has been a consistent, dark atmosphere. Then you come to the mini-boss, who is a giant monkey whose slaps is jiggling behind, and you defeat him by slashing his backside. This is supposed to be humorous, but it's so jarring against the previous portions of the game that it's like trying to run headfirst through a brick wall. Or, for perhaps the best example, Zant. All through the game, he is built up as this terrifying antagonist. He is portrayed as evil, powerful, and cruel. Then, when you meet him halfway through the game, you see just a glimpse of him under his mask, and the creep factor is raised to 11. At this point, he almost kills Midna and curses us to be a dog forever. Then, when you fight him towards the end of the game, he immediately sheds all creepiness, scariness, and mystique, and you see him as goofy, clumsy, and silly. Like, if you want the game to be dark and gritty, stick with dark and gritty. If you want the game to be goofy and cartoonish, stick with goofy and cartoonish. But this halfway house between the two manages to fail at both so spectacularly that they really shouldn't have bothered. Overall, this game is like a kid in a candy store. It's pulled in too many directions, it tries to juggle too many things at once, and as a result, it ends up dropping everything. The plot is horribly paced, the gameplay is repetitive and drags on forever, plot points come and go without any explanation, the music ranges from lackluster to my ears are bleeding, and the major plot developments are pulled out of thin air multiple times. While this is a fun game to watch others play, and it's a fun game to remember playing, I now dread my next playthrough of it.